What if the person you trusted most in the world simply vanished on Halloween night, leaving behind only questions that would haunt an entire city for decades? What if every clue led to a dead end, every witness remembered something different, and every theory crumbled under investigation? This is the story of Linda Harper, a young woman who disappeared from Austin, Texas in 1995, taking with her the answers to mysteries that still echo through the streets of East Austin today. If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and the psychology of disappearances, make sure to subscribe because this case will challenge everything you think you know about missing persons investigations. October 31, 1995 arrived in Austin with the kind of crisp autumn air that made every breath feel clean and sharp in your lungs. The live oak trees lining the residential streets of East Austin had begun their slow transition into winter, their leaves painting the quiet neighborhoods in shades of amber and gold that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Linda Harper stood at the window of her second-floor apartment on East Superior Street, watching children in makeshift costumes hurry past on the sidewalk below, their excited voices carrying through the glass like distant music. At 26, Linda had the kind of genuine warmth that drew people to her without effort. Her auburn hair caught the late afternoon light as she moved around the small kitchen, arranging bowls of candy corn and miniature chocolate bars on the counter. She hummed softly while she worked, occasionally glancing toward the bathroom where the sound of running water suggested her boyfriend David was getting ready for their evening plans. They had planned nothing elaborate for Halloween night, just a quiet evening together, maybe a walk through the neighborhood to see the decorations, perhaps stopping by Benny's diner for coffee afterward. It was the kind of simple plan that couples make when they're comfortable with each other, when the excitement of new love has settled into something deeper and more reliable. David Romano emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, his dark hair still damp, wearing the simple flannel shirt and jeans that had become his uniform during his 8 months in Austin. At 28, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had found his place in the world, though he had only recently moved to Texas from Chicago to take a job at the local newspaper. The relationship with Linda was still new enough to feel electric, still in that stage where every shared glance felt significant, where the simple act of her reaching for his hand could make his heart race. The apartment itself told the story of two lives slowly intertwining. Linda's books mixed with David's vinyl records on the shelves, her houseplants thriving next to his collection of vintage cameras. The scent of her vanilla candles had begun to mingle with the lingering aroma of his morning coffee, creating something entirely their own. Outside, the street lights were beginning to flicker on, casting long shadows across the quiet residential streets where families were settling in for the evening. At exactly 7:15, Linda grabbed her denim jacket from the hook by the door while David jingled his car keys, a simple gesture that would later be dissected and analyzed by investigators trying to piece together their final movements. The red Toyota Camry waited in the parking lot behind the apartment building, its paint slightly faded but still reliable, the kind of car that blended invisibly into the landscape of small-town America. Linda had teased David about the car when they first met, calling it dependably boring, but tonight she climbed into the passenger seat with the easy familiarity of someone who had made the same journey dozens of times before. Mrs. Dorothy Henley, who lived in the apartment directly below Linda's, later told police she heard their footsteps on the stairs at 7:25, followed by the sound of car doors closing and an engine starting. What she remembered most clearly, what would haunt her for years afterward, was the sound of their laughter drifting up from the parking lot, carefree and bright in the gathering dusk. It was the kind of laughter that spoke of inside jokes and shared secrets, of two people who believed they had all the time in the world to build something beautiful together. This ordinary Halloween evening was about to become anything but ordinary. Stay with us as we uncover what happened next, because sometimes the most innocent moments hide the darkest secrets. The last confirmed sighting of Linda Harper and David Romano came from Jimmy Kowalski, who was walking his German Shepherd near the intersection of East Superior and 15th Avenue East at approximately 7:45 that Halloween evening. He waved at the couple as they drove past. Noting how Linda had her window rolled down despite the cool evening air, her hair dancing in the breeze as she turned to say something that made David smile. Kowalski would later tell investigators that nothing about the scene struck him as unusual or concerning. They looked like any other young couple heading out for a Halloween evening, relaxed and happy in each other's company. The red Camry was traveling east on Superior Street at a normal speed, with David appearing to be driving carefully and attentively. What made this sighting particularly significant was its timing. Security cameras at a nearby gas station would later show the same red Camry turning onto Congress Avenue at 8:02, just 17 minutes after Kowalski's observation. This placed the couple in the general vicinity of downtown Austin, heading toward the area where several Halloween parties and events were taking place that evening. The gas station footage, grainy and difficult to make out clearly, showed two figures in the front seat of the vehicle, but the quality was too poor to make positive identifications. However, the license plate was partially visible, and investigators were later able to confirm that it matched David's registration. At 80:30, Rita Sorensen, a waitress at Benny's Diner on South Lamar, remembered serving coffee to a young couple who matched Linda and David's general description. The woman had ordered apple pie and the man had drunk his coffee black, she recalled. Though she couldn't be absolutely certain it was the missing couple. The timing would have been right, and Benny's was exactly the kind of place David had mentioned wanting to visit with Linda. Sorensen described the couple as seeming relaxed and affectionate, with the woman occasionally reaching across the table to touch the man's hand while they talked. They had sat in a corner booth near the window, and she thought she remembered them looking out at the Halloween decorations on the neighboring businesses while they ate. However, Sorensen's memory was complicated by the fact that Halloween night had been particularly busy at the diner, with several couples and groups coming and going throughout the evening. She admitted to investigators that she might be confusing details from different customers, and she couldn't say with certainty when the couple had left or which direction they had headed afterward. The trail went completely cold after the possible Benny's Diner sighting. No other witnesses came forward with credible reports of seeing Linda and David, and the red Camry seemed to have vanished entirely from the Austin area. Credit card records showed no activity after 6:30 that evening, when David had purchased gas at a station near their apartment. Bank records revealed no AM withdrawals or other financial activity that might indicate where they had gone. What made the disappearance particularly puzzling to investigators was the complete absence of any indication that the couple had been planning to leave town. Linda's apartment showed no signs of packing or preparation for travel. Her suitcase remained in the closet, and her toiletries were arranged normally in the bathroom. David's work schedule showed him expected at the newspaper office the following Monday morning, and he had made no arrangements for time off. Two people had simply vanished into the Austin night, leaving behind only the echo of laughter, and a red Camry that had disappeared as completely as if it had never existed. The first thing Jessica Harper noticed when she climbed the stairs to her sister's apartment at 10:30 the following morning was the silence. It hung in the hallway like a physical presence, thick and wrong in a way that made her pause with her hand halfway to the door. Jessica had driven the 45 minutes from Round Rock specifically to take Linda shopping for winter clothes, a sisterly tradition they had maintained since their mother's death 3 years earlier. Linda was never late, never forgot their plans, never failed to answer her phone when Jessica called. They had spoken just 2 days earlier, confirming their Saturday morning shopping trip, and discussing which stores they wanted to visit. Linda had been excited about finding a new coat for the approaching winter, mentioning that she wanted something in deep blue or forest green. The spare key was exactly where Linda always kept it, tucked behind the loose brick beside the mailboxes in the building's main entrance. Jessica had used it only twice before, both times during emergencies, and her fingers trembled slightly as she turned it in the lock. The apartment door opened onto a scene that looked perfectly normal at first glance, which somehow made it more disturbing. The candy bowls remained exactly where Linda had arranged them the previous afternoon, untouched and still full. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the kitchen counter, a perfect ring of lipstick on the rim as if Linda had simply stepped away for a moment and would return any second. But the coffee was stone cold, and Linda's purse was missing from its usual spot on the small table by the entrance. Jessica found herself moving through the apartment like a sleepwalker, touching familiar objects as if they might provide answers. The bed was made with military precision, the way Linda had learned from their father during his brief stint in the army. Her jewelry box sat open on the dresser, but nothing appeared to be missing. In the bathroom, 2 toothbrushes stood side by side in the ceramic holder, a mundane detail that struck Jessica as profoundly sad. The most unsettling discovery came when Jessica checked the closet. Linda's favorite leather boots, the ones she wore everywhere during the fall and winter months, remained neatly paired on the closet floor. But David's work boots, the heavy ones he wore to the newspaper office, were missing from their usual spot beside the door. His jacket was gone too, along with his wallet and keys, small absences that painted a picture Jessica didn't want to acknowledge. She called the police at 11:47, her voice surprisingly steady as she explained the situation to the desk sergeant. The officer who arrived 20 minutes later was young, probably fresh out of the academy, and he moved through the apartment with the methodical precision of someone following a checklist, rather than investigating a genuine mystery. He asked the right questions, took notes in a small spiral notebook, but Jessica could see in his eyes that he had already categorized this as a routine missing persons case, the kind where 2 adults had simply decided to take an impromptu trip without telling anyone. Sometimes couples do this, he explained, his tone gentle but dismissive. Especially new couples. They get caught up in the romance, decide to drive to San Antonio for the weekend, maybe catch a concert or see some friends. They'll probably call in a day or 2, embarrassed they caused such a fuss. But Jessica knew her sister. Linda called when she was going to be 15 minutes late for lunch. Linda left detailed notes about where she kept the spare house key when she went out of town for a single night. Linda had never, not once in her 26 years, disappeared without explanation. The suggestion that Linda might have simply run away felt like a personal insult to everything Jessica knew about her sister. But if Linda hadn't left voluntarily, then what had happened to her and David on that Halloween night? Detective Raymond Walsh had been working missing persons cases in Austin for 17 years, and he could usually tell within the first 48 hours whether someone was genuinely missing or simply exercising their right to disappear. The Harper Romano case felt different from the moment Jessica Harper walked into the station on November 2nd, her face pale but determined, clutching a manila folder filled with photographs and handwritten notes she had compiled during her own amateur investigation. Walsh was a methodical man, built thick and solid like the limestone foundations that anchored Austin's buildings, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he had seen enough human tragedy to last several lifetimes. He listened to Jessica's concerns with the patient attention he gave to all family members, but internally he was already categorizing this as another case of young adults who had simply decided to start fresh somewhere else. It happened more often than people wanted to believe, especially in cities like Austin where the music scene and artistic community attracted transient populations. Young couples would arrive with dreams of making it big, struggle with the reality of paying rent and finding steady work, then disappear one night without warning, leaving behind confused family members and unpaid bills. The investigation began with standard procedure. Walsh and his partner, Detective Susan Martinez, spent 3 days canvassing the neighborhood around Linda's apartment, knocking on doors and asking the same questions over and over. Mrs. Dorothy Henley repeated her story about hearing laughter in the parking lot. Jimmy Kowalski described the couple driving past his house with Linda's window down, her hair blowing in the evening breeze. A convenience store clerk on East Cesar Chavez thought he might have seen David's red Camry around 900 that Halloween night, but couldn't be certain and hadn't seen the occupants clearly enough to make a positive identification. The gas station's security footage showed the Camry, but provided no useful information about where it had gone after leaving the downtown area. The most promising lead came from Benny's Diner, where Rita Sorensen's description of the young couple seemed to match Linda and David. But even that sighting was frustratingly vague, complicated by the busy Halloween evening and Sorensen's admission that she might be confusing details from different customers. Walsh expanded the search to include local hospitals and morgues within a 200-mile radius, checking for any Jane or John Does who might match their descriptions. He contacted the State Patrol to add the Camry's license plate number to their database of vehicles to watch for. He even reached out to police departments in San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas, thinking the couple might have decided to disappear into the anonymity of a larger city. Every avenue led nowhere. The red Toyota Camry seemed to have vanished as completely as its occupants, leaving behind no trail of credit card receipts, no record of hotel stays, no trace of their passage through the world. David's bank account remained untouched, with his last withdrawal occurring 3 days before Halloween. Linda's checking account showed normal activity up until October 30th, then nothing. By December, the case had been relegated to a single filing cabinet in Walsh's office, just another folder among dozens of cold cases that haunted the detective's quiet moments. The initial burst of media attention had faded, replaced by newer tragedies and more recent mysteries. Jessica Harper continued to call weekly, her voice growing more strained with each conversation, but Walsh had fewer and fewer updates to offer. The red Camry had become a ghost car, spotted occasionally by witnesses who thought they recognized it in parking lots or on highways, but never confirmed and never leading to any concrete information. Linda and David had joined the ranks of the disappeared, their names added to databases and bulletin boards, their photographs distributed to law enforcement agencies across Texas and beyond. But some cases refuse to stay buried, and sometimes the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, even after decades of silence. 28 years later, in March 2023, construction workers breaking ground for a new shopping complex on the outskirts of Austin made a discovery that would reopen the Harper Romano case and shock a community that had long forgotten the young couple who vanished on Halloween night 1995, buried beneath 3 feet of Texas soil, preserved by the dry climate and alkaline earth, were the skeletal remains of 2 individuals along with the rusted frame of a red Toyota Camry. The construction foreman, Miguel Santos, initially thought his excavator had struck an old septic tank or buried fuel tank. But when he climbed down to investigate, the metallic gleam revealed itself to be a car roof, and what he saw through the broken rear window made him immediately call the police. Austin had grown exponentially since 1995, and what had once been remote ranchland was now prime real estate for development. Detective Sarah Chen, now heading the cold case unit that Detective Walsh had established before his retirement in 2010, arrived at the scene within an hour. The car's position suggested it had been driven into a natural depression in the land, then covered with dirt and debris in an attempt to hide it permanently. Advances in forensic technology meant that evidence which would have been useless in 1995 could now provide crucial information. Dental records confirmed what many had suspected but never been able to prove: the remains belonged to Linda Harper and David Romano. But the discovery raised more questions than it answered. Both individuals showed signs of trauma that suggested violent death, but the positioning of the remains and the careful burial of the vehicle indicated something more complex than a random crime or accident. The breakthrough came when forensic investigators discovered personal items that had been preserved in the vehicle's glove compartment. Among them was a small notebook in David's handwriting, its pages filled with what appeared to be notes about a story he had been investigating for the newspaper. The notes mentioned local business owners, unexplained cash payments, and references to city planning meetings that had occurred in the months leading up to their disappearance. Detective Chen realized that Linda and David hadn't been random victims or a couple who had simply decided to disappear. They had stumbled onto something that someone was willing to kill to keep secret. David's investigation into local corruption had apparently uncovered information that threatened powerful people in Austin's development community. People who had a lot to lose if their activities became public. The notebook contained names and dates that connected to major development projects in East Austin during the mid-1990s. Projects that had displaced longtime residents and changed the character of neighborhoods where families had lived for generations. David had been investigating allegations of bribery, illegal land deals, and city officials who were taking money to approve developments that violated zoning laws. As Chen dug deeper into the old records, she discovered that several of the people mentioned in David's notes had gone on to become extremely wealthy and influential in Austin politics and business. One name in particular stood out: Richard Thornton, who had served on the City Planning Commission in 1995 and later became a major real estate developer whose projects had shaped much of modern Austin. Confronted with the evidence after nearly 3 decades, Thornton's carefully constructed life began to crumble. The notebook detailed meetings where he had taken cash payments in exchange for his votes on key development projects. David had apparently arranged to meet with Thornton on Halloween night 1995, planning to give him a chance to respond to the allegations before the story was published. Instead of cooperation, Thornton had panicked. He confessed to killing both Linda and David when the confrontation turned violent, then spending the night burying their bodies and the car in the remote location where they would remain hidden for 28 years. The weight of the secret had haunted him through decades of public success, and when finally confronted with irrefutable evidence, he seemed almost relieved to tell the truth. Jessica Harper, now 58 years old, attended every day of Thornton's trial. The sister who had refused to give up hope for nearly 3 decades finally had the answers she had been seeking, though the truth brought more pain than relief. Linda and David had died because they had tried to expose corruption, because they had believed that truth and justice mattered more than personal safety. The Harper Romano case reminds us that some mysteries take decades to solve, but persistence and advancing technology can eventually bring justice to families who refuse to give up hope. If this story has touched you, please share it with others who might find inspiration in Jessica's decades-long fight for the truth. Thornton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His empire of corruption finally brought down by a young journalist's notebook that had waited 28 years underground to tell its story. Linda Harper and David Romano were finally laid to rest in Austin's Oakwood Cemetery, their headstone bearing the inscription, "Truth Seekers," beneath their names and dates. The case changed how Austin handles missing persons investigations and led to new protocols for protecting journalists who investigate local corruption. It also served as a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary Halloween evening can become the beginning of a mystery that spans decades, touching countless lives and ultimately revealing truths that powerful people would kill to keep hidden. This story shows us that justice may be delayed, but it's never denied when people refuse to give up searching for the truth. Remember to subscribe for more cold case investigations that prove persistence and hope can overcome even the darkest secrets.